Hello everybody, you are watching Wayne Brain TV, and this is actually my first video, and for my first video I thought what I would talk about is falling asleep and counting sheep and all that kind of stuff. So the way the story begins is I was talking to my neighbor up the street, is this elderly woman, and I don't know how we got on the topic, but I said at one point that I like math. And she said that she didn't like math, which is what most people say, of course. But she said that she read this really interesting story about this young boy who was good at math, and he was good at math because he was autistic, so it was like a book about autism. And so what it was, and she lent me the book. The book was called The Curious Story of the Boy in the Nighttime, or no, The Dog in the Nighttime. The Curious Story of the Dog in the Nighttime, something like that. And it was kind of a little murder mystery. This boy has a dog, and the dog gets killed, and he has to figure out who killed the dog, and so it's like a little murder mystery. And but what happens? But it's really, he has autism, and so what the real purpose of the book is to try to describe to grown-ups what it's like to be a boy that has autism. It's really about autism. And one of the things that the boy has is he has this like extreme sensitivity, and there's this one point in the book where he freaks out and he runs into a corner and he curls up into like a fetal position into a ball and covers his eyes, and he starts multiplying twos in his head. So he goes 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32, times 2 is 64, times 2 is 128, times 2 is 256, times 2 is 512, times 2 is 1024, times 2 is 2048, times 2 is 4096, times 2 is 8192, times 2 is 16,384, times 2 is 32,768, times 2 is 65,536, and so on and so on and so on. He just times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. He just keeps multiplying by 2. And he was really disappointed because he could only multiply 32s, and he was used to being able to multiply 42 of them, which is actually a pretty amazing feat. I just did 16 of them there for you. I know the first 16 because I'm a computer programmer, and every computer programmer knows, some of the, the first 16 powers of 2, at least if they're any good. So anyway, what this reminded me of is when I'm falling asleep. And a lot of times when I'm falling asleep, I'm lying there in bed and I'm like, I got all the problems of the day running around in my head, this and that, and I'm trying to calm myself down so I can sleep. And one day of course I got this idea, well, I'm just going to count sheep. So I go 1 2 3 4 5, I'm counting up to 100, and you get to 100 and you're still not asleep, so I guess you just keep going. And one day I decided that I was going to make it a little more harder, and instead of just counting from 1 to 100, I was going to factor the numbers, right? So 4 is 2 times 2, and 6 is 2 times 3, and 12 is 2 times 2 times 3, and 9 is 3 times 3, and of course, numbers like 17, the prime numbers, so it's just 17. And basically, just do this for every single number from 1 to 100, and 100, of course, is 2 times 2 times 5 times 5. The way you do this with the larger numbers is, like the number 10, you break it down into, or the number 100, you break it down into 10 times 10, and then, because you can break 10 apart into 2 times 5, then you have 2 times 5 times 2 times 5, and you can't break apart the 2's and the 5's because they're prime numbers. But you can rearrange them and get 2 times 2 times 5 times 5. So you'd say 100 is 2 times 2 times 5 times 5. So my next idea was to count the number of factors, not just to factor the number, or to count the prime factors, but to count all the factors. So every number that can divide into 100, right? So the number 100 has 9 factors. Let me see if I can do this. I'm going to count on my fingers. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, 20, 25, 50, and 100. Okay, see there, I just counted to 9. So 9 factors. The number 100 translates into 9 factors. So what I would do is for every number from 1 to 100, I would count the number of factors. And so my idea was, I'm going to figure out which number between 1 and 100 has the most number of factors out of all of them. And I first thought that the answer was going to be, just the, if you multiply 2's, 2 times 2 times 2, what's the largest number you can get before you go over 100? And that's going to be the answer. And that number is 64. 2 times 2 times 2 is 6 times. If you multiply another 2, you get to 128, which goes over 100, right? So I figured 64 is going to be the largest number between 1 and 100, or the number with the largest number of factors between 1 and 100. Right, that's what I figured. But then I went through every number from 1 to 100 while I was falling asleep and counted the number of factors for every single one of them, and it turns out that 64, which has 7 factors, right, because it's 6 2's, right, so it's 1 and the other 6 powers of 2. Then for all the numbers between 1 to 100, the largest is, it turns out it's a 3-way tie between numbers that have 12 factors. And so you kind of figure, well, 2 is the smallest number that you can multiply together. So how do you get a number with more factors than, 2 to some power? And the answer is, it turns out that when you throw in another number like a 3, that the 2's and the 3's have more combinations than 2's just with other 2's. So for example, if you have 5 2's and 1 3, then 5 2's and a 3, 5 2's is going to multiply out to 32, and you take 32 times 3, and you're going to get 96. And it turns out that 96 has 12 factors, and it's less than 100. Right? And it turns out that there's 2 other numbers like that. And another one of the numbers, let's see, how else can you do this? You can do 2, you can do, I was doing 5 2's and a 3. Another thing you can do is you can do 2 3's. Now, how many 2's would you need? You're going to do 3 2's and 2 3's. Okay, so 3 2's, 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, and 3 times 3 is 9, right? And 8 times 9 is 72, and it turns out that 72 also has 12 factors. And I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to have to make this a 2-part video. I'll be back in a sec.